It is incredible the amount of damage a poorly worded headline can cause, not only on the readers, but also, I believe, on governments. And I think it has led directly to the lack of urgency on particular issues, including the one that I'm about to talk about. So, in this video, I'm going to go over a poorly worded headline, the context underlying it, and hopefully you come out of this video better understanding why you should question the framing around news stories. Not the facts within the story, which are almost always accurate, on point, but what context may be missing from the story, as well as how you are told the story through the actual headline on top. So let me start with the article that I'm going to focus on here, but I want to get to deeper into it later in the video. I do want to give the underlying context first. But this is the headline that triggered me this morning. From the Toronto Star, and to be clear, this is a Canadian press piece. Netanyahu says Canada, UK, France offering huge prize to Hamas with Gaza letter. Keeping in mind, this is a straight news piece, a Canadian press piece. This is not an op-ed, an editorial. This is a straight news piece. So I'm going to get to the issue with this headline and the context that it lacks within. But let me start with the context for this entire story. So from CBC News here. At least 55 killed in Israeli airstrikes in Gaza, where UN says more aid will be delivered. Check this out. After criticism of aid plan, Israel said to allow about 100 trucks to enter Gaza on Tuesday. This is a solid headline and solid subheading because this tells you a lot. Israel said to allow. Why does Israel get to dictate what aid enters Gaza? Because they control the borders. This alone tells you who holds all the cards in this situation. This is not an equal war with two equal sides. This is one country dominating Palestinians. That is the reality of the situation, and it tells you that in the headline here. So, more details on this story. The attacks were carried out on two homes where women and children were among the 18 dead, and a school housing displaced families, among other areas. Israeli strikes have killed more than 500 people in the past 8 days. And the UN has long said Gaza, with a population of about 2.3 million, needs at least 500 trucks of aid and commercial goods every day. The UN has received permission from Israel for about 100 more to enter on Tuesday. So I'm glad this piece gives that context, but there is other context worth mentioning here. And that is the fact that an Israeli newspaper here reported on May 20th, Netanyahu's Gaza aid U-turn isn't about compassion. It's about keeping the war going. So despite Netanyahu's approval of limited aid to Gaza under U.S. pressure, the plan's execution is raising alarms from fears of forced displacement and clan-led boycotts to logistical failures and security risks surrounding the American firm tasked with distributing food. And this is directly a quote from Netanyahu himself. We must not reach a state of hunger, not for practical reasons and not for political ones. They simply won't support us, and we won't be able to complete the mission of victory. They want to maintain the most bare minimum of aid possible so that it appears to outside critics that, well, they're allowing aid into Gaza. They're at least trying to help the people there as they continue to bomb them. But look, they're helping them out. This gives him the ability to continue attempting to take over Gaza completely as they destroy the lives of everyone there. Now, this was announced after Netanyahu is claiming he wants to forcibly take control of the entire Gaza Strip, which was something I have reported on for over a year now. It was always clear that that was the goal. And again, my reporting based on actual journalists and what they have uncovered and what they're following. Palestinians will be forced to flee or be gathered into concentration camps, euphemistically termed closed communities by the IDF. This was always the plan. Which gets to the story that we're going to get into. So, Canada, Britain, France threaten action if Israel does not stop military offensive and lift aid restrictions. So, this is the piece from the or I should say the statement from the Prime Minister of Canada, joint statement with the UK and France. I'm just going to read a paragraph here. I'll link to this below the video. It's a long statement, so you can read through it if you want. But there are a couple things that I want to note here, or I think is worth noting. Quote, we strongly oppose the expansion of Israel's military operations in Gaza. The level of human suffering in Gaza is intolerable. Yesterday's announcement that Israel will allow a basic quantity of food into Gaza is wholly inadequate. We call on the Israeli government to stop its military operations in Gaza and immediately allow humanitarian aid to enter Gaza. This must include engaging with the UN to ensure a return to delivery of aid in line with humanitarian principles. We call on Hamas to release immediately the remaining hostages they have so cruelly held since October 7th, 2023. This is, yes, an issue with the Canadian government, the UK and France here for not acknowledging the reality that I'm going to get to in a second. This is also an issue with how this topic has been covered. These ongoing claims that Hamas have completely rejected any attempts at a ceasefire, any attempts at a hostage deal, when the reality is the complete opposite. Over and over again, Netanyahu has rejected ceasefire for hostages deals. So this was November 2023. This was a month after October 7th. September 4th, 2024, Netanyahu derailed a potential Gaza hostage deal. That's from an Israeli newspaper. April 20th, 2025, Netanyahu rejects Hamas hostage offer to end war in Gaza. Those are 3 examples. You can find more. And in fact, hostage families have been protesting him, saying Netanyahu is deceiving Israelis because they understand what's been going on. Because to be fair, there are publications within Israel that are properly reporting on this in a way that we are not seeing in the West. So the way it's reported here is that, Hamas really wants to keep these hostages, not willing to discuss at all any kind of deal, when the reality, again, is completely the opposite. Because the whole purpose here for Netanyahu isn't to get the hostages back, it's to dominate and take over Gaza. So they go on in their statement to say the Israeli government's denial of essential humanitarian assistance to the civilian population is unacceptable and risks breaching international humanitarian law. Risks breaching international humanitarian law. We oppose any attempt to expand settlements in the West Bank, which is good they're noting that. But again, this has been going on for decades. We will not hesitate to take further action, including targeted sanctions. So this is where, they're very vague here, but we may put sanctions on you if you continue these actions, this denial, this rejection of humanitarian law, which, okay, before I get to the headline, since I put this deeper in the piece, Netanyahu is under an ICC arrest warrant for war crimes, for starvation, for completely violating international humanitarian law. This has been well documented already. Here it is. The arrest warrant. Responsible for war crimes of starvation as a method of warfare and intentionally directing an attack against the civilian population, and the crimes against humanity of murder, persecution, and the other humane acts from at least October 8th, 2023 to when this was issued, May 20th, 2024. This idea that, he better stop because he's risking the breach of international humanitarian law. Not only have they been doing that for the past year and a half, they've been expanding in the West Bank well before that. This idea that, they're only now attempting to expand settlements in the West Bank, they have continued to do that for over a decade. So the whole framing of this piece is completely off. And again, I have to assume that the Prime Minister knows this, that the Prime Minister's office is aware of this, that France is aware of this, that the UK government is aware of this. I have to assume they know all of this. But because the media does not take them to task, they're allowed to go out there or go out here and claim, "Oh, we are very angry with Israel for these newfound attempts at violating international law and these all of a sudden they're expanding settlements because there hasn't been a narrative that has been clear enough to state what's already been happening." That gets us to the headline. So again, I said Canadian press piece, meaning a lot of outlets just copy and paste the article. But Netanyahu says Canada, UK, France offering huge prize to Hamas with Gaza letter. So Toronto Star, same headline. City News, same headline. And it's in many places. This is Winnipeg Free Press, same headline. Do you see the issue with this headline? You have somebody who is under an ICC arrest warrant, angered by minor pushback to his crimes against humanity. In fact, that should be the headline, as I wrote online. Israeli PM under ICC arrest warrant, unhappy with slight pushback against his ongoing crimes against humanity. This is a more accurate headline of what is going on than this. Because this headline tells you, hey, what Canada, France, and the UK are doing here is helping Hamas. That's what the average reader takes from a headline like this. That doesn't give you the context of what is actually going on. Not to mention the piece itself. The only mention of a ceasefire is at the very end, or potential ceasefires at the very end, where they bring up that Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs Director General accepted a ceasefire or a proposal for a ceasefire, but Hamas rejected it, despite the fact that there has been at least 3 examples of Netanyahu clearly rejecting a ceasefire hostage deal. That isn't mentioned at all here. There's no mention in this piece that Netanyahu's under an ICC arrest warrant. How do you not mention the main character in your headline is currently under an arrest warrant? How is that not part of the framing of this article? So when this sort of headline is this stuff is ongoing. It isn't like this is an isolated incident where this is the only time that Netanyahu has been framed this way. This is how the Israeli government and Netanyahu is consistently framed in Western media as, at very least, the good guy. At worst, a neutral player in an equal war, when neither of those are true.